Good afternoon. I have no announcements, so I'll try and answer some of your questions. Yes, sir.
Landmine policy. Could you walk us through any of the exemptions as we move towards, I guess, joining the Ottawa process? There was just I guess a one-page release out of the White House. Any other details?
Let me first say that I think that probably everybody here has seen the announcement that was made by the White House yesterday that indicated that there is a delegation that has gone to Geneva for the purpose of looking at steps that we can take so that we could achieve our goals of which are primarily humanitarian, but at the same time also protect our national security interests. And this Ottawa process, which has been going on for some time, has a number of nations that have participated. And what this delegation is seeking to do is to determine if we can affect language in the treaty which will enable us to sign up to it in December. As I mentioned just a second ago, our primary goal in all of this is to balance the humanitarian goal, which we have been pursuing for some time, with the goal to protect troops, which we have had since the beginning of our review of this whole issue. By going to this process and participating in it, we hope to not only achieve these humanitarian goals, but we hope to also encourage some of the other nations who are participating in this process to undertake some of the very programs which we have underway and have had underway for a number of years in demining efforts. I think many of you are aware that the United States and indeed the Department of Defense has been a real leader in tackling the issue of landmines, which have such a destructive power. And we actually have a number of people and a number of programs underway in a significant number of countries to get rid of landmines. And those programs have been going on in their present form since about 1993, and they'll continue to go on. Now, with regard to the exceptions that that you actually asked about initially, our primary concern in the Department of Defense is not only achieving this humanitarian goal, but also protecting the forces. I think everybody is aware that we believe that there is a requirement and believe very strongly in the requirement for landmines in the demilitarized zone in Korea. And so that's one. We also believe that there needs to be an exception for anti-tank and anti-vehicular landmines, which have a submunition component which is anti-personnel in nature. There is another category of landmines, anti-personnel landmines, which in this building are called pure anti-personnel landmines. And those landmines we do not feel are critical to our requirement to protect forces. And so those are not part of the exemptions that we are seeking as we go forward in this process. Yeah.
And if I just follow up, that part that's not exempted, the so-called pure,
right.
I guess does that include those mines that are capable of self-destructing after
Yes.
a set piece of time?
Yes, we're talking here in excess of 8 million mines. Now, there are some other things, too, but I don't want to get too deeply into the weeds in this thing, primarily because the whole purpose of this group going over there is to see what we can negotiate in terms of language for the treaty, and to see if we can, in the end, participate in the signing of this treaty. We don't know at this point whether that's going to be possible. We hope that it will, because we feel that this is an additional venue which offers opportunities that were not possible in the CD process because of the slow pace of activity there. And the president and people in this building felt very strongly that this offered an opportunity that we should pursue, and therefore this delegation has already departed, and I believe they're in place now.
From what I understand, the Joint Chiefs and some of the regional commanders are against getting rid of the self-destructing landmines until we have a system to replace it, to give our forces adequate protection. What efforts are underway to develop any?
Well, first of all, I would take issue with what you have said there. What the Joint Chiefs and what this building has been concerned about from the very beginning, of course, is the force protection issue. And the force protection component that we believe, after a review of our policy in this building, the force protection component that we feel must be protected in all of this has to do with anti-tank and anti-vehicular mines, which, by the way, are self-destructing. We believe that the language needs to be such that these mines, which are a package when they are put down, need to be retained. After this review, we find is not essential to our mission has to do with the pure anti-personnel landmines, self-destructing ones.
Those in Korea?
No, there's an exemption for Korea, which we feel strongly about, and then the language that we feel needs to be appropriately contained in this treaty must cover the anti-tank and anti-vehicular mines, which we feel are very important force protection measure.
Anywhere, not just Korea.
Yes.
But Mike, within those packages or clusters or whatever you want to call them, there are anti-personnel.
There are anti-personnel munitions that are part of those packages. They are a component of the packages. They are not, however, pure anti-personnel mines.
Nevertheless, if a child came near them...
No, that is not true, Charlie. What we have here, and I think people need to understand what mines, anti-tank and anti-vehicular mines, are used for. These mines are used for the purposes of blocking, of controlling opposing forces. Those mines that I'm talking about are self-destructing mines. They self-destroy in either 48 hours. 95% of them do, and the other 5% self-destroy in several days. We don't want mines that don't self-destroy, because what this enables us to do is to delay the advance of an opposing force to the point that we could use air assets to destroy it. We don't want to have mines that are dumb mines and that have the capability to do what you're talking about, Charlie, which is to harm individual people, because oftentimes our forces have to go through those very minefields to reach their objective. And so what we're looking for is, and what we have developed over the last 20 years, is this self-destructing capability, which does not provide any kind of danger to innocent civilians who may wander through the field at some later week, month, year in the future.
These mines are protected. These anti-armor, anti-tank, anti-vehicular mines are protected by anti-personnel mines.
They have this submunition component, of which the purpose of which is to prevent the opposing force from going in there and detonating the anti-tank mines so that they become ineffective. That is their purpose. But let me say, the overall purpose of these anti-tank mines is that they are to provide a protection and a control mechanism for our forces so that enemy forces are delayed and controlled in such a way that our area assets can destroy them.
I understand that. But could not civilians set off those smaller protective mines?
Charlie, I reject that, because on the battlefield, you simply don't have civilians wandering around trying to detonate anti-tank mines. These are packages.
To detonate anti-personnel mines.
But Charlie, I think what you're talking about here, and what we need to be very clear on, is that the anti-personnel landmines that are crippling people and killing people are mines that the United States does not manufacture, does not export, and does not use anywhere except on the Korean Peninsula in the demilitarized zone. We are in the process of getting rid of those mines, and we have gotten rid of more than 1 million of them at this point, these dumb mines. And one of our big concerns in all of this is that we want to be part of a treaty that actually has some effect on this problem. And in order to do that, it has to have the capability of affecting those nations which manufacture and export anti-personnel landmines that do this. That we are not talking about mines that are manufactured by the United States.
Also, you talked about two different exceptions there. One for what you're talking about. You want a time limit. You want a time limit on the smart anti-personnel mines to give you time to develop some replacement for it.
No, this is not what I'm saying. We already have what we need in the self-destructing mines. The smart mines.
But you want a replacement for those, so you want some kind of time limit, time constraint, time factor within a new thing.
Charlie, I can't give you a time constraint on all of this because at this point I'm not sure. One of the big concerns that we have regarding time in all of this is the amount of time it will actually take to destroy the existing stockpiles, and we do not have a good sense of that. But we do have a program underway to develop alternative measures. But we are not talking about delaying in order to develop alternative measures. That is not a part of this component.
Mike, you say that one of the things we want to do on this is to affect the nations that manufacture and export landmines.
Right.
But isn't it true that China and some of the other major manufacturers are not part of this?
That is true. They are not part at present of the Ottawa agreement. We do intend to pursue the Conference on Disarmament because that approach includes such countries. Our hope, however, is that by also pursuing the approach in the Ottawa process, that those who sign up for that treaty may also ultimately be brought into the other treaty.
Or Don't sign on to Ottawa.
Well, and who don't may also, but we're pursuing both. It's a multi-track approach here.
Two informational points. First
Sure.
of all, are there any other areas of the world besides Korea that the Defense Department thinks it needs an exception for? And secondly, how long does an exception have to last? How long is the U.S. asking for? Is there some limit on it, or is it unlimited?
Well, you mean for Korea? Until we have a situation in Korea where we don't need them, and I can't predict how long that would be. Well,
Exception for the whole peninsula?
I think we want an exception on the Korean Peninsula that protects our ability to protect not only U.S. forces but also Republic of Korea forces as long as there is a threat from the north.
Just for the DMZ, or would it be for the whole peninsula?
Well, that's where the minefields that are presently in existence are located.
How many mines are in those?
What about Cuba or anywhere else? Are there any
In
other?
Cuba, there have been dumb mines. Those mines are being removed. I think about half of them have been removed, and all of them will be removed by 1999. That process started some time ago, even before the president's announcement a year ago.
How many do you have in Korea now?
How many? We
Anti-personnel
don't.
landmine.
We do not specify how many we have there
Why not?
for security reasons.
Did not the Joint Chiefs write in a letter to Senator Thurmond that one of the additional exemptions they did want was for anti-personnel mines that could explode on their own, apart from anti-tank munitions?
The present doctrine that military forces use, for the most part, calls for the use of those two mines together. That is to say, anti-tank mines used in combination with anti-personnel mines. And so we feel that the category of mines, which are self-destructing anti-personnel landmines, are not a separate requirement that we need to retain.
But the Chiefs didn't release a letter to Senator Thurmond, apparently.
I think if you go back and take a look at that, what they primarily were interested in was a force protection capability that was keyed on anti-tank, anti-vehicular mines that had this submunition component that was anti-personnel in nature. Is everybody okay on that one? Good.
Yes, there were published reports yesterday, Mike, that the PRC was continuing to ship nuclear related type equipment to Pakistan in violation of their word given last fall. And then, even more, I think more importantly, I'd like you to address this. Benjamin Gilman yesterday, Congressman Gilman said in India, I believe it was, that this effort on the part of the Chinese to aid Pakistan was intended to make India unstable militarily. Can you, how does the DoD view that particular statement?
Well, I think you're aware, Bill, that we watch very closely the shipment and sale of weapons, but with regard to the allegations that you cite there, I don't really have anything for you on that.
You haven't seen Mr. Gilman's
I
statement?
have not seen those. Yeah.
Can you give us a readout on the instructions given to the special police brigades over in the Bosnia area in a meeting last Friday?
No,
And
I think on any of those, you ought to talk to the folks over at S4. They'd be happy to give you a lot of detail on that. And in fact, we may actually have some of the transcripts from some of the briefings that have been given. Yeah, Charlie? Yeah.
The New York Times story today, where Sheenan said that he talked to 5 members of the Presidential Committee on Gulf War Illnesses, which is slightly less than half of the membership, saying that they favored revisiting and revising the earlier conclusion by the committee that Gulf War illness or illnesses or sicknesses in large part were caused apparently by stress, possibly by battle stress, and probably not by chemical or biological weapons. What does the Pentagon have to say about that?
Well, I'm sure you're aware that we're very much interested in the final supplemental report, which is being assembled by the PAC. That report, as far as I know, has not been written, and I don't feel it would be appropriate for me to comment on a report that has not yet been written. Having said that, though, I will point out that we have for a long time been involved in research on various hypotheses that have been projected about what might be causing illnesses which are afflicting some of the Gulf War veterans. We have research going on right now into the effects of low-level chemical exposure. We have proposals out for other research to be conducted on the effects of various other possible sources of these illnesses. But the bottom line to all of this at this point, Charlie, is that at this point in time, we know of no single cause for the illnesses that some of the Gulf War veterans have.
When the report came out, the Pentagon by and large agreed with the committee's conclusion that these probably that the large part of these illnesses were probably not caused by chemical or biological weapons. Have you seen anything to change that, or do you still believe that?
Well, I think, Charlie, one of the things that I've learned as I've stood up here over the last 5 or 6 years is to make no definitive statements with regard to Gulf War illnesses. The things that I can tell you have to do with what we are doing, and that is we are looking into the matter. We continue to look into the matter. We have research ongoing at the present time. We don't have any final answer, any single answer as to what might be causing Gulf War illnesses. And the other thing that I would like to point out, which I do at each occasion, is that veterans who are ill, if they are on active duty, need do no more than seek treatment from a military medical facility, and they will find it there. Veterans who are ill should go to the appropriate Veterans Administration medical facility to receive treatment there. The bottom line is that people who are sick because of what they believe to be a Gulf War illness, many of those individuals are being treated, and we have a very wide ranging research effort ongoing at the present time to try and find out anything we can about what might be causing these illnesses. Yeah, Mr. Lamb.
Another subject. It was reported extensively in Athens that the Sixth Fleet is going to be deployed permanently in the Aegean Sea. Do you have anything on that or any comment?
Permanently in the Aegean Sea? That does not sound right to me. The Sixth Fleet operates in the Mediterranean area and has for many years. There are very few components of the Sixth Fleet that are actually based in the European theater. The Sixth Fleet flagship is home-ported in Gaeta, Italy, and there are some other assets that are over there, but I know of no plan to permanently deploy any part of the Sixth Fleet in that part of the world. In fact, I would go a step further. One of the beauties of naval assets is that they can be moved around. And to talk about permanently deploying any asset in one location is kind of against the very purpose that we have naval assets.
Even temporarily, is there any plan in this particular period to be something to this effect?
I don't know. You'd have to talk to the people about Sixth Fleet. I don't have any detail on what their deployment schedules are. It's possible that they could be going up into that area from time to time.
One more question. Do you know where the issue of the 3 frigates to Turkey stands today from the Pentagon point of view?
The Turkish frigates, there are 3 Perry-class frigates which are being provided to Turkey. 1 is being leased, and 2 of them are being provided as excess defense articles. The leased vessel there was congressional notification made a year ago, but the lease was placed on hold on the 1st of April in 1996 until the 2 excess defense article transfers notifications were complete. Those 2 frigates, the ones excess defense articles, are currently in the process of waiting for a 30-day congressional notification period to be completed. That period expires at the close of business on the 23rd of August. Once the notification process is completed and Congress has expressed no objections, if Congress expresses no objections, the Navy can start the process by making the transfer of the vessels as early as Monday, the 25th of August, and the Navy will work directly with the Turkish Navy to effect the transfer. I would point out that there is a period of time that will be required to bring the ships up to the point that they could actually be sailed, but the process could begin as early as Monday the 25th.
Do you give them on a condition to Turkey? You know that.
Well, it's the congressional notification is the condition, and there is a lease involved in it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. That's for the third one. For the first 2 is this excess defense articles process. Yeah, excuse me, just one second. Yeah.
Hi. Yesterday, the U.S. and South Korea started military exercises, and North Korea has been protesting, saying that we're making threatening moves. Does the Pentagon have a response to that? And don't you think that the timing's a little bit off there, considering it's a little inappropriate, considering the 4-party talks?
Well, first of all, I think that although I can't cite for you any details on exercises that are going on, our exercises in that part of the world are defensive in nature. We operate and exercise from time to time with the forces of the Republic of Korea. They go on almost year-round in some form or another, and they are certainly not meant to be provocative in any way. Bill, did you have one?
Yes, thank you. Let me ask another China-related question. The talks, and I'll tell you the relation as I go along here. The talks in Panama on a drug base are not going well. The United States could lose its last opportunity to continue to maintain a presence in Panama. And the relation to the Chinese is that a conglomerate that is very closely related to the PRC, the PLA especially, is going to be managing both ends of the Panama Canal, the ports at both ends. And doesn't the Secretary in this department want to continue to keep a military presence in Panama, in the canal zone?
Bill, what you've just said there sounds kind of mixed up to me. What the Chinese component of this thing is? What is this? A company of some sort?
Yeah, the people that have gotten the contracts for Cristobal and the port of Balboa are very closely linked to the PLA, and they will, of course, be taking over those ports. And the U.S. Could completely lose its presence in the Panama Canal Zone if the deal isn't made to continue the drug base. So I'm asking.
Well, but it seems to me, Bill, that it has been known for years and years that ever since President Carter decided that we were going to withdraw from Panama, that indeed that was going to occur, and that process is ongoing right now. The process that you're talking about having to do with our counter-drug activities is a separate issue, but the military forces who are located there at the present time will be departing, and we've made no secret about it.
But my question is, doesn't this department and the secretary wish that this drug deal will go on, that U.S. forces might continue to be based?
We'll continue that process, but that is the counter-drug activities and any presence that would be related to those have absolutely nothing to do with the Panama Canal. Absolutely nothing to do with the Panama Canal. Yeah. Just 1 second, Charlie. There's one other.
Sorry, Charlie. Quick question. Now that the grand jury in Texas has declined to indict the Marine for the death of the goat herder, what's the timetable? Have they speeded up the Pentagon for determining whether to put U.S. troops back in Border Patrol duties?
No, you know, we've got a review going on, and until we complete that review, we won't know exactly whether we're going to return to any kind of ground force involvement there.
What's the timetable for the review? They've been going at it for more than a month now.
Well, I know it's been going on, and I don't think that there's any timetable set. They just want to make sure that they get it right.
If I could just go back to landmines for just 1 second with the risk of flogging a dead horse here. If landmines are considered useful in the Korean theater, why are they or could they not be considered useful elsewhere?
Well, I think you have a situation in Korea that is considerably different from a lot of the other potential hotspots in the world. You have essentially a very large force, which is the majority of which is perched on that border, and which could move in very short notice and be in a major population center. And I think that is a unique situation, which, in the minds of the military experts, calls for the use of these minefields that are so much a part of the doctrine there. We believe in that particular scenario that those mines would essentially give us a capability to forestall an invasion, and would give us a better chance of protecting the Republic of Korea. We feel that it's an important element there because of the large numbers of troops and the way those troops are presently deployed.
Did the chairman recommend to the secretary that the unique anti-personnel landmines separate from those anti-tank ones, that those be retained through an exemption going into the Geneva process for Ottawa?
Say that one more time.
Did the chiefs recommend to the secretary that so-called pure anti-personnel landmines be exempt?
Be exempt for what period of time? At this point, no treaty has been signed.
In terms of the U.S. negotiating position that was announced yesterday,
Yes.
outlining those systems that are exempt, Korea, for example, and the anti-tank systems. Did the chiefs also recommend that a third exemption be undertaken, and that being the so-called standalone anti-personnel
No,
landmines?
the chiefs are on board with the approach which is being pursued by the negotiators at this point.
Was it their initial recommendation?
Well, I may not have made myself clear. There has been a review which has been going on for some number of months, and the end result of that review has been that the chiefs decided that this was one component which was not absolutely essential to the force protection measures that they felt needed to be part of the of any treaty that we would sign up to.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me start by welcoming Mr. Hahn, who is visiting in connection with the U.S. Information Agency's program, and he comes to us from the Republic of Korea. And with that welcome, I will try now to answer some of your questions. Charlie?
Mike, could you fill us in on the situation in Banja Luka and whether or not any U.S. ground troops are involved in this?
Charlie, this is an activity that actually is being undertaken by S4 troops who are supporting the International Police Task Force. There were some U.S. aviation units that were involved in the early phases, but to my knowledge, there are no U.S. troops that are involved right now.
Is this part of the operation that will eventually be aimed at capturing some of the fugitive war criminals that was denied by the Pentagon a couple of weeks ago?
Well, actually, this comes under the rubric of creating a secure environment and supporting the International Police Task Force. What we have going on in Bosnia right now is what has been going on for over a year, and that is the mandate of the S4 units and before S4 I4 to implement the Dayton Agreement. The basic goal of S4 units is to create this secure environment that will enable civilian authorities to do the work that they must do to ensure that Bosnia can get on its feet as a country. In this particular instance, the IPTF, who had done some inspections, I think it was on Sunday, determined that all of the police installations in Banja Luka needed to be looked at more closely. They are not armed authorities. The International Police Task Force do not carry arms. And so they sought from the S4 commander support to secure these facilities. That support was provided by NMD Southwest, and there were 5 installations in Banja Luka that were secured. I think that most of you have seen the reporting that has come from the scene that indicated that that as a result of the inspections that have been done by S4 troops and also by the IPTF, that a number of arms have been captured. And this is consistent with what S4 troops have been trying to do since they started their presence there in Bosnia, and I4 before them, and that is to get control of arms that are loose in the in the country that are not contributing to good order and security there.
For the record, would you again deny that a plan has been put into operation with the aim of eventually capturing war criminals?
Well, the war criminal business, which we've talked about from time to time, actually, the requirement on war criminals is a responsibility of those who have signed the Dayton Agreement, the parties who have signed up to that. They are responsible for turning over war criminals. There have been actions taken by S4 in the past, the most recent one being where sealed indictments were delivered and a war criminal was captured. But S4 does not have the responsibility of capturing war criminals, although they certainly are provided the authority to detain indicted war criminals as they encounter them and when the on-scene commander deems that it is appropriate and their forces have the capability to do so. This operation that was conducted down there had nothing to do with war criminals, however.
Captain Doubleday, were
Yes.
are officials in this building surprised by the quantity and types of weapons that were recovered in these raids? Obviously weapons that normal police folks don't use.
Let me go through what some of these weapons were so that we all know what we're talking about here. They included assault rifles, sniper rifles, machine guns, rocket launchers, mines, hand grenades, booby-trapped explosive devices, and other explosives. And some of these types of weapons have been outlawed by S4 as being very excessive for what one would normally expect a civilian police force to require. In fact, the general S4 guideline regarding long-barreled weapons is that normal civilian police forces in Bosnia should have no more than 1 per 10 police officers. And in this particular case, there were several thousand weapons that were actually confiscated in this operation.
It mentioned, Captain,
I want to, excuse me just 1 second, I want to make one correction that the aviation units, the U.S. aviation units, are still supporting that operation in Banja Luka. Yeah, Bill.
Yes, Captain, it did mention in one of the articles I read on this matter that it was thought that there were a great deal more weapons of this type that were in Srpska. And I would ask if there are any further raids contemplated to recover such weaponry. I understand that the country is just loaded with weapons. I believe I
Well,
heard that.
let me go into just a little bit on that. Some time ago, the SAC-UR, who at the time was General Jowan, determined that that S4 should take should review the whole business of police in Bosnia, and as a result of that, shortly after General Clark became the SAC-UR, he sent out an order which defined the police in one of two ways. On the one hand, there were civil police. These were police in the generally accepted sense that we in the United States think of police. individuals whose primary duty is civilian law enforcement in accordance with international standards. And those individuals, just for the purpose of Dayton, are covered under one section of the Dayton Agreement. Those police units, by the way, have oversight by this International Police Task Force, the IPTF. There was another category of specialist police, and these are forces belonging to organizations with a military capability, and they were engaged in the maintenance of internal security as their primary duty. They are covered under another part of the Dayton Agreement, the part that S4 is primarily concerned with, Annex 1A. And because S4 is primarily concerned with that aspect of it, under this definition, S4 is responsible for keeping track of these units. Now, in this particular instance, down in Banja Luka, what we were talking about was civil police installations, not specialist police, civil police installations. That's why the IPTF was the organization that had responsibility for investigating these facilities, and why they called upon the S4 units to come in and help secure the facilities so that they could do their inspections.
Captain, I'd like to go back to something you said a few moments ago, that U.S. Aviation is still supporting the operation. Could you elaborate on what the operation is and what the aviation is supporting?
Well, first of all, the operation is to, as far as S4 is concerned, is to secure civil police installations in the town of Banja Luka, where the International Police Task Force suspected that there were violations of the Dayton Peace Agreement. And the International Police Task Force is doing an investigation of this. You'll have to talk to them about the status of their investigation and exactly what they have found. But in connection with this operation, there were some aviation units that provided overhead security as the facilities were being secured by ground forces. Those ground forces, this was in an area called Multinational Division Southwest, which is primarily a British sector. The British have the lead in that sector.
You're talking about attack helicopters, right, Mike? And aviation.
I don't have any detail on exactly what kind, but they're the helicopters that are at the disposal of the commander over there, and I don't have any numbers either, but I'm sure that they could probably provide you some detail of that over there in Tuzla.
Was
Yeah.
it assumed that the aviation will be the extent of U.S. participation in these similar?
Well, I wouldn't want to assume anything. Although there are sectors where the British, in this particular case, have the commander on the ground. We have the division up north, and the French have the division in the southern section. There is certainly a lot of movement of personnel, and the S4 commander has the capability to draw upon whatever forces he may feel he needs wherever he may need them. Just 1 second, Tammy.
Could you explain this distinction between this operation and the specialist police barracks, and I believe it's the Domet factory outside of Banja Luka that was also secured by S4 yesterday?
Go over one more time. This operation, which is going on in Banja Luka, is a civil police operation. It is, to my understanding, it is not involving the specialist police.
But didn't S4 restrict specialist police to barracks right outside of Banja Luka also yesterday and
It may have been
confiscate their
in
weapons?
connection with this. That may have been part of the operation, but this is primarily directed against civil police installations in the town of Banja Luka. Yeah, John?
Two questions. First, did the S4 commander have the authority to authorize this operation off his own bat, or did he refer it up to Secretary?
No, had the authority. He has the authority. He was called upon by, he was asked by the Office of the High Representative and the International Police Task Force authorities who remain in very close contact with the S4 commander to provide this support. It was not anything that had to be referred to Brussels for approval.
Could I ask about personnel? In practice, both the instances of NATO getting tough.
Let me just add one other point to that. The reason for that is that this falls under the overall rubric of the S4 requirement to maintain a safe and secure environment in which civil authorities can do the work that they must do to implement the Dayton Peace Accord.
Can I ask about personnel? In both the instances of NATO getting tough so far, that is, capturing war criminals under sealed indictment and now disarming the paramilitaries, in practice it has involved British troops going in with U.S. Helicopter and logistics support. Okay, is that in fact the division of labor that's been agreed for these Get Tough operations?
No, I think it just happens that in this particular instance and in the other one that was the way it worked out. But I think that that there's no division of labor that specifies what country is going to do what job. I think the S4 commander is always in a position to call upon assets that he feels he may require wherever the operations take place. In this particular instance, in Banja Luka, where the situation arose, it happened to be in the sector of the country that was led by a British unit.
So can we expect to see similar Get Tough measures in the U.S. sector, like, for instance, the arrest of war criminals?
Well, I don't want to predict anything other than the fact that S4, their mandate is to implement the Dayton Peace Agreement, and they will continue to do that on all fronts, and wherever they see infractions of the peace accord that need to be corrected, they'll take the steps necessary to correct it.
I was wondering if we're looking for evidence of the new Get Tough policy in the American sector, what would we look to?
Well, John, I'm not sure that I would necessarily agree with you, the premise of that question. That is to say that I think that the policy that S4 has had, that NATO has had throughout here, has been one where we have been creating this environment. I think that you could say that we have taken the extra step here of late as a result of the assessment of the police situation to ensure that these specialist police units, which were actually very military in nature, were brought under closer scrutiny, and that their weapons were put under the same controls that military units had. So I'm not sure I totally agree with the approach that your question there seems to imply. Yes.
What was the precipitating factor that led to this so-called lockdown on the police facilities in Banja Luka? Was it the suspicion that there were weapons over and above that which were allowed for those police forces, or was there a tip?
It was a suspicion that the IPTF had that there were human rights violations going on. And as a result of that, I don't want to say there was a meeting because it's a continuing dialogue on the part of the leadership of all the many participants in the Dayton Agreement. But in this particular case, it was the Office of the High Representative, the International Police Task Force, and the S4 commander to react to this concern that the IPTF had that there were these violations.
Violations more specifically were folks detained there, or?
Well, I think it had to do with threats against certain parts of the judiciary, some of the other activities that were going on in those civil police installations. And as a result, of course, they've uncovered these weapons which seem to be way beyond the requirements of what a normal civil police unit would need.
Facilities had been inspected not too long ago, correct?
By the IPTF.
That's
my understanding is yes, they had. I don't have any detail on the degree to which they had been subjected to inspections. You'll have to talk to the IPTF about that.
Mike,
Yeah.
Mrs. Plasek, I believe, has said that Mr. Karadich was behind an attempt to overthrow her regime, and I would ask if I-4 and this department believe that that is correct, and if so, what about those special police in Palais who protect Karadich? Once again, isn't it imminent that I-4 would have to move against them and disarm them, take their capability away?
Well, to answer the second part of your question first, I would refer you to what General Clark has said on this same subject in the past, and that is that the specialist police should do only those things that are legal. And as an indicted war criminal, Mr. Krasnik owes it to the people of Srpska to turn himself into The Hague to answer the charges that have been filed against him.
But doesn't it look like it's coming to the showdown, whether it's either get Karadzik or Karadzik will take over once again by force?
I don't want to predict what it is getting to. I think that the actions here have to do with the civil police installations in Banja Luka.
And then just one more follow-up.
Sure.
Mr. Gelbard's role in ordering this raid, I
Now, wait a minute.
Was he not involved in?
What I've been saying all along is that we have the International Police Task Force, we have the Office of the High Representative, and we have the S4 Commander. We don't. Mr. Gelbard is not a part of this equation.
Not in the chain of command, and was not in the chain of command in this particular matter.
Mr. Gelbard is a representative of the United States. He certainly is a part of the overall U.S. policy. He is not a part of the S4 chain of command, though.
Mike, what's the status of the special policemen whose weapons were confiscated? Will they be allowed to rearm themselves to a certain extent, or are they permanently disarmed?
Well, now, first of all, we're talking specialist police, we're talking civil police, the civil police. The IPTF is going to have to make an assessment there as to what the requirements are. One of the mandates of the International Police Task Force is to come up with a restructuring of the civil police forces in Bosnia. This is all part of what their mandate is. They not only go out on patrols, they not only monitor what is going on with the civil police, but they have been very active in restructuring police organizations. And what they will be doing in Banja Luka is to pursue that particular part of their mandate. And again, I'd have to refer you to the International Police Task Force to really get any insights into what their plans are in that regard. Charlie?
Might change the subject.
No.
John?
On Mr. Gelbard's role, I mean, several correspondents for several different newspapers, based on briefings given by unnamed, quote, senior American officials on the spot, did say this morning that Gelbart had ordered the raid or cleared the raid. Is that just self-aggrandizement on the part of the unnamed senior member?
Well, I don't want to speak for Mr. Gelbart. All I can tell you is that there is an S4 chain of command that does not involve Mr. Gelbart.
Can I follow up? I'm just wondering to what extent we're looking at a setup here. I mean, there's nothing new about these paramilitary forces. The stations were inspected, and threats between both sides in the Serb battle between the Plavjic faction and the Karadzic faction have been commonplace for months and months and months. I wonder if this isn't just a case of us discovering that we're shocked to discover that these paramilitaries are going around, but in fact it's a political decision just to take down a chunk of Karadzic's power base, and that the request from the International Police Task Force was a timely but prearranged excuse. To what extent is this just a basic political decision to take down a chunk of Karadzic's forces?
John, all I can tell you is that the sequence of events that occurred over there was such that the International Police Task Force, the Office of the High Representative, and the S4 Commander determined that it was a requirement to take a look at these police installations at this particular time, and they did so.
So you're saying it was happenstance and fortuitous and just happened like that?
Well, I would say that it was driven more by events than anything else.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Charlie?
One last question, if I could, Charlie. General Clark, the last time he talked in public, he said he didn't really know what kind of police were guarding Mr. Karadzic in that last conference. I think it was around the 11th or 12th. Has there been a determination made as to what kind of police are in fact guarding Mr. Karadzic out in Bali?
Well, I don't think it makes any difference what kind of police are guarding him, because he is not an elected official, so he should not be guarded by any kind of police, and specialist police or others. Duly elected officials are accorded police protection.
Karadzic is receiving so-called police protection from any quarter right now. That is unauthorized as of right now?
If he is receiving specialist police protection, he should not be receiving specialist police protection.
Same for civil police?
He should not be receiving any kind of specialist police protection. He is not a duly elected official. And in fact, part of the Dayton Agreement required him to step down from any kind of post he had.
Does the ban on his
Excuse me?
Does the ban on his protection also include civil police? You mentioned specialist police. Does the ban also prohibit civil police from guarding Mr. Karadzic and other indictees?
I don't know how I can say this any more clearly. People who are not elected officials should not be guarded by police, civil or otherwise.
And does it follow that if in fact he's being guarded by anybody, that it is then the responsibility of S4 or what particular police agency to disarm whoever is guarding him?
I think we'll wait to see what unfolds on that one. Charlie?
On the B-2 bomber, what's the Pentagon's reaction to the GAO report this week and the announcement by the Air Force that it could be at least 2 years before B-2 bombers can be deployed overseas because it might rain on them?
Charlie, I haven't seen that GAO report. I don't want to really comment on it until I've taken a look at it.
Says that these planes have to be constantly maintained in special shelters because humidity and rain and other things could affect their stealth capabilities. And the Air Force has conceded that it could be at least 2 years before they're deployed overseas. Any deployment overseas could occur because no such shelters are available there.
Before I comment, let me take a look at the report and see what it looks like.
Take the question,
We'll
report
see
came
what
over.
we can come up with. Yeah. Any
Thanks.
others?
Thank you.